Let me start by saying my name is Tom Moreau. Welcome to Buoy Land. I moved up here in '89 and started working at Icicle Seafoods and became infatuated with buoys. I'm standing on top of a buoy that actually has a name, and when people come here, they want to know how it got here. Where'd you get that? And it came from out west. A couple fishermen on this fishing vessel Susitna found this on the shore. They thought they'd bring it back to Homer and sell it for a lot of money. That didn't work out. Years went by. I moved this thing around the yard over and over, and finally I asked the skipper of the boat. I was like, "Hey Mike, what are you going to do with that buoy?" And he's like, "What buoy are you talking about?" It's like, "The big buoy." And he's like, what do you want with it? I said, "Well, I can offer that buoy safe haven for the rest of its life." And he looked at me weird and he goes, "Do you want that buoy?" I said, "Mike, I'd be honored to have that buoy." He says, "If you want it, you can have it." So this is the General Tolva buoy, named after Mike Tolva, who gave me the okay to take it away. And I used a company flatbed and I backed down the driveway. I attached a rope to one side, threw the rope over and against a tree, and I'd run at the rope and pound the rope, and the buoy would slowly rock with each pounce against the rope. Eventually it fell off the truck, it landed here, and it hasn't moved since. It's lost a little bit of air over the years. That's the story of General Tolva. When I bought the land in '89, I walked all four corners, and back here was a almost perfect circle grove of trees with a large opening in the middle. And that summer, I was living on the spit, and I was picking up buoys that washed up in the harbor or fishermen threw away. I probably had a dozen buoys attached to the fence behind my pickup truck where I lived out on the spit. And when the sale was completed on this land, I walked into the grove. We'll show you that in a second. And I took that buoy and I wound it up and I threw it up into the trees and it stuck, and that's where it stayed. And that just kept going and going and going. This path, if it had a name, it would be called Buoyland Lane. And this is the path that leads us into Buoy Land proper. Follow me. Almost every buoy in Buoy Land has a story, and this buoy came from the Great Salt Lake, and it was at a time at the beginning of this drought that we're in, and the lake began to drop and drop and drop. This buoy was laying flat on the ground, and we were visiting with some friends that lived in Salt Lake, and I made them stop the car. I was like, "I gotta go check it out." And I went and looked at it. Wasn't attached. We put that thing inside their Isuzu Trooper, and now it lives in Buoy Land for the rest of its life. If this path were to have a name, because it leads to Buoy Land proper, the name would certainly be Buoyland Lane. Well, this space shouldn't be here. Buoy Land. Follow me. It was marked with a big tow line. To know the story of Buoy Land, you kind of need to know the story of all this land around here. In the late 90s, the spruce bark beetles came through and pretty much annihilated the big trees that weren't as healthy as, the younger ones. So, like, this tree with the 3 sheep skull on it was a real important part of Buoy Land and had many buoys. And the one with the top knocked off, that held many key buoys. These trees that are down, These were the trees in that circular grove that I spoke of, and the a lot of those trees are dead now. One survived. This one. This is one of the original trees in that grove. Right here was the center. And here's this is a little house where you go down into a boat. There's a prop off of a boat back here. When the trees all came down, I lost my fire for Buoy Land, and it didn't have the same. Oh, it wasn't what it used to be. So, and I also moved away from Alaska in '99, and in the meantime, in the last 25 years or so, the trees that were made when the dead, the dying trees, threw out all these cones, and there's a bunch of new healthy trees, and just beyond, just beyond the old dead trees are new trees, and I believe this will get cleaned up someday because my son is interested in it, and Buoy Land will rise again.
What about these?
These are things I just collected. Like a God's eye came from a yard sale, I'm sure. A scale no longer used from the cannery. Blocks that fishermen forgot about and left behind and neglected. Herring techs at Icicle Seafoods would go out west, and bring, like, they brought back this. See, everything's falling apart here. But this is a really cool buoy with the rope casement around it. Some coral, big old chain. Things get forgotten about in the yard at Icicle, and I would ask if I could have them. They said, take it. Actually, behind me here, one of these buoys is the first buoy I ever collected. I won't say which one. Back in the heyday, there were 3 trees here, 3 beautiful trees, and they're all gone. You can see the stump of one back there. This was a section called Memorial to Fishermen Gone Past. And if I had one of your buoys in Buoy Land and your boat went down or you died or something, I would take your buoy from Buoy Land proper and I'd move it over into this section. I had buoys from the Susitna, the Morning Star, the Clio. Kelly Clark passed away as a young man. So I'd move your buoy over here, and it was just a little memorial. I had a totem, and he's on the porch. There was a net with all these hot dog bun buoys at the bottom of the net. And when visitors came, you would pick a buoy off the bottom of the net. You would write your name, where you're from, and what you think. People say, what do I think about what? Whatever you think. And this person drew a picture, and then they hang it on the web. This person visited, it looks like in '95 or '99. Yorkowski. Yeah, it's fun to. This person was from Arizona. The magic markers have faded over the year. One of the most memorable quotes on these buoys is Buoy Woogie. Here's Sam from Chicago. Oh, this looks like my mom's handwriting, actually. Huh. Yeah, this was fun. And you could pull the web back and kids could scamper up. Yeah, dinosaur tracks. So, big part of this story is I'm from Arizona. I grew up in northern Arizona on the border of the Navajo and Hopi Indian Reservation. 5 miles down the road from my house was the dinosaur tracks, and the people that sold jewelry there would make these hand painted signs, and that was a really good one. And I saw that thing and I just decided it needed to live in Buoy Land. That's Rasta Fisheries. Red, gold, and green. That's what this came from. Had to have one of those. Come with the tree. This was a gift I think my niece received, and it's a rattlesnake from Arizona. And I asked her if I could put that in Buoy Land, live there for the rest of its life, and she's like, sure, you can have it. And this is where it was put, and that's, I see things and I'm just like, that's got to be in Buoy Land. If you look way up there in the trees, there's a big, crab buoy. And people wonder, how do you get the buoys up there? And like I said, like the first dozen or so were on ropes. And I'd, spin them and toss them. And wherever they wrapped around the branches, that's where they would hang. And then, young man I got really good at climbing trees. And I did. I would climb up these spruce trees, and they're pretty easy to climb. They're good trees to climb. I would attach a rope to my belt loop, and I would drag behind a 20-30 foot section of rope. The buoy would be on the end of the rope. I'd find the spot I wanted to hang the buoy, and then I'd pull the buoy up and tie it off. Then I started to have a lot of buoys hanging in the trees. I started to pay attention to spacing and color. I didn't want, too many pink ones over here or too many yellow ones over here. I needed a blue one here, and Buoy Land became my palette. It was my art. And along the way, I got a 28-foot extension ladder, and that really helped. And I would just rattle up that ladder and climb right up the trees. And yeah, that's when things were really taking off. Much safer too. Back in the day when Buoy Land was in all its grandeur, and I was living up here full time, I'd give tours of Buoy Land. People would hear about it from a friend, or I'd run into people, and they'd come up. We'd enter Buoy Land the way we did, by General Tova. We'd walk down Buoy Land Lane, go into Buoy Land proper, which is behind me here, sort of. And we'd go to the web. They would hang a buoy on the web. And it's interesting, when they hung a buoy on the web, especially if it was a couple, some couples would write both of their names on one buoy and hang it on the web. Some couples would each write their name on a buoy and they would hang them together on the web. Some couples would choose their own buoy and fill them out and then hang them on different places on the web. And I always thought that was interesting, kind of a indicator of the relationship. But back to the tours. The tour really wouldn't end there. We'd go down to the cabin and I'd show them how we live off the grid without electricity and running water. And although for those of us in Homer, it's really common and not that interesting, but for people from outside, they just think it's really cool how you take a shower on a 12-volt pump and heating the water on the stove. And they just thought that was cool. And I thought it was nice to welcome them into the cabin. I would also walk them down the hill to the spring, where the spring was dammed. And in the spring were typically 2 or 3 kegs of beer. I was a member of the original Q&Q Brewers Guild that went on to create a lot of professional brewers that have gone on to successful careers in the brewing industry. And we all started in Homer. But I would serve them a draft beer from the spring down there if they wanted. And then the tour would kind of end, and we'd walk back up the driveway. And when I sent them on the way, people always wanted to know what the payment was for a Buoy Land tour. And I would tell them, buoys, beers, buds, or bucks. And sometimes just a hug would suffice. but the tours are always fun. This is Guilan. This came off of a schooner, a 1905 schooner. It was at the very tippy top of the center mast. Ricky Mares, who worked at the cannery, halibut fisherman, part-time, fishing vessel Morning Star, who has a buoy in the memorial to fishermen gone past, has his plaque at the fisherman memorial out on the spit. Ricky Mares bought the Guilan, and he was parting it out. He sold the ship's wheel, he sold some cabinets, he sold all the instruments. He needed to get everything he could out of the boat before he took it out into the ocean, put some dynamite in it, and blew it up and sank it. And Guilan was at the top of the mast, and it's quite heavy actually. And he wanted big bucks for it. He was thinking hundreds of dollars. But it was the next to last day. He needed to sink the boat. We were at the break room at Icicle, and Ricky was like, "Hey Ricky, what about the totem at the top?" And he's like, "How much you want to give me for it?" I said, "Well, I'll give you all the money in my pocket." And I think I had $33 or $37. And he goes, "Okay, and you got to cut it down." So just the reverse of Buoy Land here. I climbed up that mast with the saw attached to my belt loop. I sawed it off. I took the rope, I tied it around the Guilan, and then lowered the Guilan down to the deck on the rope. And Guilan was adorning the little memorial in Fishermen Gone Past, but now he lives on the porch of the cabin when we're here for the summer. That's the story of Guilan. So there's a sequel to Buoy Land. Buoy Land, the trees started falling down. I moved to Anchorage for several years. I still had that buoy energy in me, and it needed to come out somewhere. And Buoy Man was born. In February of 1994, there was a particularly weak run of herring that came back to Buoy Bay in Prince William Sound. It was the spawn of the herring from the Exxon Valdez oil spill year, 1989. These herring were lifted onto the buoys in Buoy Bay and spawned on those buoys, and they went out to sea and died. But behold, from their death became Buoy Man's life. He's the spirit of the bygone fish that spawned up on the land that gave life to the buoys that formed the Buoy Man. That's one story. Another story is we were sitting in the cabin. You could pan over there and show them the cabin. It was February 1994, the night before the Homer Winter Carnival Parade. And we're like, we should participate in the parade tomorrow. It's like, yeah, let's get a bunch of buoys out of the trees and decorate the truck. But man, that's an awful lot of work to crawl up in the trees, harvest the buoys, decorate the truck. It's already like 8 o'clock at night. So we had a different idea. I'll just cover myself with buoys. Behold, Buoy Man. And there's pictures of Buoy Man on his birthday. Growing up as a very young man, going to school with Navajos and Hopis, there comes a time when they get initiated and they start to take part in ceremonies. And as a white person, I was not allowed to be part of those ceremonies. I could watch, but I never, took part. So when I got older in life, I wanted ceremony in my life. And when I cover myself with buoys, it's a special thing. Buoy Man goes to parades, and to mimic the religiosity of the tribes, when Buoy Man goes to the parades and has gifts in his satchel and he hands them out, and he makes people smile and he makes people laugh, if he's in good spirits and they're in good spirits, good things happen when people are happy like that. And that's the whole point of Buoy Man. A lot of older people of all ages wonder, like, what's up with this freak and why does he cover himself with buoys? And that's fine, because the Buoy Man isn't for them. The Buoy Man is for the young and the young at heart. And when Buoy Man marches down Pioneer Avenue on the 4th of July and he makes a 4-year-old smile, or if he makes a 10-year-old dance with him, or if he walks over to the 94-year-old in a wheelchair and hands her a painted buoy as a gift and she smiles, that's as good as it gets, and that's who the Buoy Man is for. And just to spread those smiles. Sometimes I take it as a challenge when people are grumpy and don't want to smile, and I do my darndest to get them to smile, because I want to share that happiness that I feel when I'm in that mode. So Buoy Man does all sorts of events, but lately it's been mostly parades. But looking back in time, you know, he led the Fur Rondi Parade one year, won an award. He marched in the 4th of July Parade in Spenard. He took a break in '99 and actually traveled down the West Coast through some national parks. He went to Fish Expo in Seattle, got kicked out of Fish Expo. Too distracting, they said. But Buoy Man ended up in Utah, and my son was born in 2000, and each year on my son's birthday, Buoy Man would bring him usually a plastic dinosaur. And I think the funnest part of Buoy Man going to my son's birthdays was other kids invited to the parties would scream and cry and run for the door and hide behind their mom and crawl under furniture, and my son would just kind of look at Buoy Man, and the last thing that usually happened before Buoy Man left was he'd walk up and give my son a hug, and he never was freaked out by the Buoy Man. So from the years of like 2004 to 2018, Buoy Man lived in Utah and didn't come out much, maybe a couple weddings. But Buoy Man moved back to Alaska, back to Buoy Land in 2018, and now he attends the 4th of July parade each year, and that's kind of his big hoopla. And if you want to see the Buoy Man, the 4th of July parade in Homer is probably the best place to see him. One last thing about Buoy Man and that child who turns 23 in a couple days here in 2023. We had his 21st birthday party here. We had his 22nd birthday party here. There may or may not have been kegs of beer involved in those parties, but twice now, Buoy Jr. has donned the Buoy suit. So when you see Buoy Man on Pioneer Avenue or wherever, he's going to move a certain way, he's going to look a certain way, he's going to act a certain way. He's going to be about 5'10", maybe 5'11". There'll come a time when Buoy Man gains 4 inches. So if you see a 6'4" Buoy Man moving a little bit differently, there's the backstory.
I don't think you're allowed to video sacred things.
You don't have any gifts. Goes right smack down in front. Left arm. And then it hooks on right under this buoy. See this? It hooks on under there. Because you don't want it jamming you in your neck. That's pretty well down there. on the nail. Something else hangs on the nail. Oh, these. See all these loose shit down here? We should have done this first. There's this loop.
There's a nail?
Yeah, there's this loop.
It's more like the head puts everything together.
This nail. And that should have done this first. Just pull the nail all the way through. Pull down here. Look for this loop. That's good stuff.